Tonight's topic is going to be fall vegetable gardening. We're kind of moving into a little transition period here in August. A lot of our summer crops, our plants are, they're kind of going into the final stretch of the season. I always find, tomatoes and peppers, a lot of them can produce on well into the fall. I got banana peppers that produce prolifically throughout the fall to the first freeze. So, but I know squash is kind of petering out. The corn's being harvested, and beans are kind of in their last run. So we're going into the fall season, and we're going to get things ready for our fall gardens. Now, just in general, selecting a garden site, you need to have 6 hours of daily sunshine. Try avoid trees and hedges. Make sure you got well-drained, medium texture soil, and consider convenience to house and wood. Or if you're a community garden, they have to have supplemental water, especially as they get established. Definitely have to have that for the garden, although we're not needing a whole lot of supplemental water now. This is showing you the importance of water. This right here is the University of Georgia Stripling Irrigation Research Farm in Camilla, Georgia, which is below Albany. That's where they do research on irrigation. And we're not totally talking about our lawn irrigation. We're talking about those big boom irrigation sprayers that you see down in South Georgia. I think we've all seen them. This is showing you on the very edge of where the water is coming. So the corn on the outside is not getting as much as it is further inside. So you can see where it's not growing as quick, not growing as prolifically. Now, another thing that's very important to take into consideration is the soils. We tend to have pH as a measure of the soil's acidity and determines the relative availability of nutrients. A pH of 6 to 6.5 is considered the best for a vegetable in the majority of plants. The major nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK. Those are the percentages of those are the three numbers on a fertilizer bag. Like if you have a 10, 10, 10, that's 10% of each. Now, this is the reason why pH is so important. You got your major nutrients or macronutrients, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are, but they get that from the air and water. They got the three major nutrients of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the NPK on the fertilizer pack. Secondary major nutrients, calcium, magnesium, sulfur. And then your micronutrients, your minor nutrients, iron, zinc, manganese, copper, boron, molybdenum, and several others. Now, if you notice, as it becomes lower in pH, you see that 6 to 6.5 range is really where they're the best available to the plant. However, some of those, if you go lower in the pH, which remember 0 to 14 is the pH scale, 7 is neutral, below 7 is acid, above 7 is alkaline. Now, if you start getting too acidic, some of the vital nutrients become less available, and then iron, zinc, and manganese become more available. And aluminum, which isn't a plant nutrient, it can be toxic. So that's one reason why plants in a more acidic environment don't grow as well. Now, some plants have a higher iron requirement, thus are iron-loving, acid-loving plants. Those are your rhododendrons, azaleas, blueberries, centipede grass, camellias, mountain laurels, and several other plants. They need to have a lower pH. I know blueberries is 4.5 to 5.5. These plants, if the pH is too high, they're not getting iron, and they suffer from what we call iron chlorosis. That's where the leaves will develop, the veins will be a light green, and then the rest of the leaf will be anywhere from a light green to yellow to white. And that's the vegetable plants we're talking about. It's not that pH is not is 6 to 6.5, so that's all we have to worry about. You can see this picture right here. The plant on the left these are collards. The plant on the left was grown with a pH of 4.5. The other is 6.0. That can be problematic there. As you see, 4.5, they're much smaller in growth. It does. You can see the plants aren't growing as well. That's because they can't get the vital nutrients as the ones on the and the iron and aluminum are becoming toxic to them. Now there is something you can do. Soil sampling through UGA Extension Gwinnett. I have my email that at the end we have some special instructions on how to sample soil if you want to have it done because our office isn't taking soil samples. But how you would do it, they're $8 per sample, and there's also a kit you can order online. I don't have the website with me right here, but if you email me, I'll send all this information to you, or it's $15 to have it mailed to you and you mail it back to the lab. But anyhow, you see in an area, you take, it's a 1 inch wide core down 6 inches, and you do that from 10 to 12 to 15 samples in that area in a zigzag pattern. You get those core samples, you pull out all the vegetation and roots and any rocks, mix it together in a bucket and get 2 cupfuls out. And it needs to be dry. Wet soil is hard, it delays process. It needs to be as dry as possible. And the cost is $8 per sample. Now you'll get your report back. And it may take, usually it's 10 to 14 days. I don't know, it may be a little longer now due to the pandemic situation, but you'll get a report in line, you'll get a pH and lime recommendations. You will, it also give you the phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, and it says manganese, although a lot of them don't do that. I don't think they do that anymore. But you don't get nitrogen. Nitrogen is a couple different forms in the soil, and it varies. It fluctuates throughout the season, so we just what the research has shown is been the ideal requirement for nitrogen for that particular crop. And if you have questions, you can contact me. There's on there, what you'll do is a routine test, a whole bunch of different tests, but the routine test is all people need. And there'll be a crop code that says home garden. There's a special code that we would put on there, like for vegetables, and then send that to the lab, and then you get your fertilization and that report. If you have questions, you can contact me because I get a report in a special mailbox on my computer. I can answer your questions. This right here is a 10-10-10 plant food, the fertilizer. This is one of the most common. This is what I use a lot of. 50-pound bag, 10% of 50 pounds for each of those nutrients. Plus 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, 10% potassium. So you got 15 pounds of plant food and 35 pounds of plant filler. That's the material that helps it to disperse. Now, organic amendments are very important in the soil. It's best to mix in organic amendments to help. Red clay soil in and of itself really isn't the best growing. It needs to have the organic amendments help improve, retain moisture. It provides nutrients, and it also allows aerification and drainage of the soil. Topsoil, compost, peat moss, things like that are what's good. Now, let me give you some little facts on your organic amendment. If you get a tree blown down, like, we got a lot of storms around lately. Now, hurricane season, they say it might be back this year. So you might have a tree blown down, and get tree care company, come out there and chip it up, and you get all these wood chips. But you don't incorporate that directly into your soil because those wood chips have what we call a high carbon to nitrogen ratio. They will take nutrients out of the soil for the microbes to break it down. What those wood chips are going to need, they need to have time to compost and break down. That could be several months to a year or more. Depends on the type of wood, depends on the environmental conditions, and a variety of things. However, wood chips can be used on top of the soil as a mulch. That's perfectly all right. Another word of caution I have is with the use of cow and horse manure. You should try to avoid using fresh manure because a lot of pasture managers, they spray herbicides on their pastures to kill weeds, broadleaf weeds. And they can be, I know there's one called Grazon that they use a lot. It can be, have a pretty long residual life, and the animals could potentially consume it. It goes through them. And you bring that fresh manure back to your garden, you could bring herbicides that could potentially harm your vegetables. Best way, manure that's been composted for 2 or 3 months is all right. You see this black cow on your right, that manure is perfectly all right to use because that's been broken down. Now, people ask me, well, using this as organic fertilizers, things like, or what about like bone meal, cotton meal, fish emulsion, and so forth? You can use that as a fertilizer, but there's some things. First of all, it's an organic form, and the microbes have to break it down to a form that the plants themselves can use. And what that does is, and also that can, it depends on a lot of conditions on how long that would take. But also, you can see right that cow manure is 0.5-0.5. They usually have a low nutrient level, not like the synthetic fertilizer. But yeah, organic amendments are a must. All right, work the garden with a tiller or spade when the soil moisture is right. You do not want to get out there and work it right after it's rained or it's been heavily irrigated, because it can mess up the structure of the soil, make it hard to work in. Do the hand test, the squeeze test. Now, being gardeners, you gotta learn to get your hands dirty, very dirty. I remember I spent many years as a landscaper, and I was dirty all over at the end of the day. It might happen working your garden as well. But anyhow, get a ball of the soil, squeeze it. And if it stays solid like this, it's too wet to work. But if it crumbles up, it's workable. You can go ahead and work it. But make sure it's dry enough to work. Planting the garden, you have to plan what you want, how much. This right here is the UGA garden over there near off South Millage, down below the botanical gardens. You can see their fall crops. They got some cabbages and collards and some lettuce and some other things growing over there that we're going to talk about shortly. These are your cool season crops. You can see cabbage, carrots, kale, collards, lettuce, mustard, onions, English peas, radish, spinach, beets, broccoli, cauliflower, Swiss chard, and turnips are those and a few others like rutabagas can be grown. Here's an interesting fact. Several of our vegetables come from a root plant. As you can see, Brassica oleracea, over the years, that's been hybridized because that's like a wild mustard plant, and probably over couple thousand years, I know it's been around for a long time. They've been hybridized. Selection for terminal buds, which is cabbage, lateral buds, Brussels sprout, selection for stem, kohlrabi, for leaves, kale, for stems and flowers is broccoli, and for flower clusters, cauliflower. They all come from the same root plant, Brassica oleracea. And if I believe that's from Europe or the Middle East. I don't quite remember where they come from, but anyhow, leafy greens are a lot of those you'll be growing this time of the year, like lettuce. There's many different types of lettuce. Head lettuce tends to be more difficult to grow. I know you all like that iceberg lettuce in the grocery store, but forget about growing that. It won't grow. It doesn't grow well down here due to our environmental conditions. You got your leafy green lettuce. There's purple. There's green colors, various colors, and then the butter crunch lettuce on the left. is really nice lettuce to have. They need to have moist soils, cooler temperatures. You can sow them by seeds, and they're really good vegetables to grow. Easy to grow, especially if you're a novice at it. Just keep the weeds down, harvest them as needed, and keep them well watered. They're all these leafy greens do need a fair amount of water. Collards are among my favorites. They eat. You can grow those by seed or by transplants. Transplants, I mean the things you buy at the grocery store and plant. Excuse me, the garden center, and you plant the transplants, or you can grow them by seed. Easy to grow. You can harvest both the small and the bigger leaves. Although the smaller leaves, it's said to be easier to cook and taste better, which is they can be cooked fresh. They can be frozen, and there's if you want to cut collards fairly small, then the seeding rate can be increased. So you can plant them closer together if you want to cut them when they're small. Some people say that they taste better after the first frost, which is true. A lot of these plants can handle cold temperatures, but when you get down to real cold temperatures, like in the low teens and single digits, I guess it was about 7 or 8 years ago we had this happen, and I didn't cover mine or anything. I said, "Oh, it's a cold day. I'd like to go pick some collards and have some collard greens." I go out there and it's mush. So if it gets down that cold, you probably gonna need to cover it with some plastic or something. But it rarely gets that cold in this area. But with the way the weather is around here, that's very unpredictable. Mustard greens are grown a lot like collards. There's smooth mustard greens and curly mustard greens. They can be used in salads. They can be often grown together with turnip greens and collards. Easy to grow, usually grown from seeds, although they can be grown from transplants. Different varieties out there available. Again, they're quite easy to grow. Kale is quite popular. It's becoming more and more popular. It's a very tasty garden plant, full of vitamins. The very lot of vitamins, low in calories. Like most of these plants are like that. Don't have they don't have sugar and full of salt and other things that we need to cut down on or avoid eating. Just a healthy, here's Siberian kale, which is a lighter in color. They can plant them by seed, but more commonly by transplants. And they'll be in nurseries before too much longer. Usually from Bonnie plants, and I'll put some pictures of Bonnie plants at the end of this presentation. One thing I like to mention is some of these plants are grown as ornamentals. There's ornamental kale, ornamental cabbage, ornamental mustard, ornamental Swiss chard that is planted. You know these flower beds that you see all over the place? You see a lot of them planted in there. It's coming more. Parsley is another one. That's an herb. That's a cool weather herb. Spinach, it's another good plant to grow in the fall. It's excellent vegetable to harvest throughout the winter and the spring when given proper maintenance. There's puckered, cup leaves, or smooth leaf. So make sure they have good drainage because these tend to be a little more prone to rot. You can use them fresh or cook them. Cook spinach, it's weird. I love cooks. I've always liked these greens my entire life. And when I was a kid in school, I was the oddball, and I liked that because sometimes they would serve spinach and lunch, and everybody's pitching a fit. And I said, "Hey, what's everybody's problem here? I mean, it's delicious, but collards are better." But that's just my personal opinion. Cabbage, this is commonly grown here. It does well. There's red cabbage, purple cabbage, and you need to keep the soil moist when you're growing it. And plant them about 18 inches apart. 60 to 80 days after you put the transplants, they're best grown by transplants out. And you need side dress fertilizer. I mean, you put fertilizer out when you plant it, mix it in the soil according to the soil test if you get one, and then throw a little sprinkling of fertilizer around it during, about a month later. Cabbage is easy to grow, and it's I'd say easy, but a little more challenging than some of the vegetables. But if you grow it right, you'll get a nice couple of big heads, some heads of fresh cabbage to harvest. Bok choy is one of the many several leafy cool weather oriental vegetables, popular in stir fries and other oriental dishes. That includes Chinese cabbages, mutsumi, pak choy, and others are easy to grow in the garden. That's that's very popular in a lot of dishes. So that's easy to grow. Brussels sprouts taste a lot. Those are like little mini cabbages. Small sprouts are produced in the axils of each of the leaves. To keep them more productive, you can prune the leaves off from the ground up to where the sprouts have been harvested. That forces new buds out further up on top of the plant. I've always had a little trouble growing Brussels sprouts down here. I don't know why. A lot of people, some people have success with them, others don't. But they are very good to eat. They're very good. I always think of something humorous when Brussels sprouts is that TV show Leave It to Beaver. It was on a long time ago, and how Beaver got in trouble because he wouldn't eat his Brussels sprouts. Every time I see or hear Brussels sprouts, that's the first thing I think of. English peas. These are not to be confused with the summer peas, southern peas, black-eyed peas, cow peas. This is a cool weather pea. It's a lot like there's an ornamental variety called sweet peas that grow. They really do better in the spring than they do in the fall, but they can be planted in the fall. They will withstand a considerable amount of cold weather and even a light frost, although the real cold weather will die out. Some are smooth, others are wrinkled. They say that the wrinkled seeds have a sweeter taste than the smooth seeds, which are starchy. Others, some varieties are low growing, other varieties are can grow higher. In the past few years, edible pods types with edible pods have been introduced to the market. So you got these edible seed pods here. Broccoli, oh, this is one of my favorites. Fresh broccoli out of the garden is one of the best tasting things there is. It is basically transplants is what you need to do, and usually harvest 65 to 70 days after transplanting, and you're harvesting the flower buds that are still tightly closed. And what you do is you get that when it gets there, maybe 6 to 8 inches in diameter, is cut it off, and then it'll form buds. It'll form in its leaf axils, lateral buds, and harvest them. And they're real easy to grow and very tasty. You can eat the greens as well, the leaves. That also is edible. Although broccoli is more known for its the flower buds. Cauliflower. This is one of the more challenging vegetables to grow. I really don't recommend this for a beginner, but you can. Best to grow from transplants. This was actually from one of our school gardens. My program assistant, Kim Fritz, works a lot with school gardens, and they were able to grow this, which is amazing. Cauliflower, what you need to do, I'm going to show this to you. You see what you need to do with the blank call is where you tie the leaves together to deny sunlight to the flower buds, the flower heads. And because if too much sun gets to them, they turn bitter and dark color and rough, kind of a rough texture to them. There's also some that are purple varieties. They got a lot of different varieties. So if you really want a challenge for you, plant some cauliflower and see how productive it is and what you can try. Again, no guarantees on that due to the difficulty and challenges, but I know people that have planted it and they grow very well. I had a lady tell me that she traveled to Egypt and they grow a lot of it over there. It's Swiss chard is another one. There's the yellow stem varieties, red stem types. They often use in ornamental plantings sometimes. There's types of ornamental. Another, they're relatively easy to grow from seed, more commonly from transplants. The only thing you got to keep in mind with Swiss chard, when you need to use it fresh right after it's harvested, it doesn't store very long. So that's why you probably wonder why you don't see this in the stores. They're very rare. That's like raspberries are like that. They need to be used as soon as they're harvested. Here's one of my favorites, arugula, which can be grown from seed. The fact is that about the only way you can grow it. This has a low growing green that has a real peppery taste to it. It's very good, easy to grow. Plant them right now. It's a good time to plant them, and you'll be a great addition to your salads and a variety of dishes. You can use arugula. Then we're going to discuss now about our root crops, some root crops that we can grow. We talked about the above ground plants. Now we're going to talk about those that have roots below. Probably the most well known are turnips. They're grown both for their greens, the leaves, as well as their root underground. They basically the greens are the roots are more for the fall crop, and that's what they're better. The fall is the best time to get the roots, whereas the spring is more of their greens. They don't produce as big. But the roots, harvest them when they're about 2 inches in diameter, and you don't want to let them get any bigger than that because they get hard and rough tasting. They're but they're easy to grow from seed. I mean, very easy to grow. Just make sure you thin them out good. That's definitely one for a beginner. Beets, they also need to be in deep, well drained, loose soil. All these root crops definitely, they don't need them in a pure clay soil. You need to have aerated, well drained soil. Plant them, and you'll get a good crop of them. If they're grown in proper conditions, harvest them when they're about 1 to 2 inches in diameter. They can be used, their greens can be eaten as well. Carrots are relatively easy to grow from soil. It's easy to grow in the garden from seed. They There's many different varieties. That some of them are rainbow color, different colors. Some are white colors. Some are small growing. Others get real big, but they definitely need loose soil, a very well textured soil in order to allow the root to grow down. That's a tap root. It's got to go down. If the soil's too hard, it's not going to do very well. Seed them and thin them out, and they're very if they're happy where they are, they will be productive. They take 60 to 80 days to maturity, depending on the variety. Make sure you pull weeds. They don't like a lot of weeds. This right here is an easy one to grow, radish. They can be grown from seed, plant them directly, and they can be harvested within a month. When that little red root ball gets to be 1 inch wide, you can also eat the greens. They have a real strong, peppery, flavorful taste, and used for salads and other dishes. There's other types. There's something called a daikon radish. This is that's an example of what it needs to look like when you harvest it. There's a daikon or trophy radish planted for deer forage. This is more for the deer and not for the people. It's interesting because I get calls, a lot of people, how do I keep the deer away? And I can tell you from personally about deer this summer, I had corn growing and they destroyed more than half my crop. So I'm familiar. But then I get calls from other people who are establishing wildlife plots. How do I get rid of they're bringing the deer to them. I wish they could take all the deer to their place and away from my garden. So daikon this radish is used, as well as something called the tillage radish that they use as cover crops on farms. Rutabagas, they're pretty good to grow. They got to be about harvest when the roots are 4 to 5 inches in diameter, and they can be planted by seed, but more commonly by transplants. Be a little bit challenging to grow, but they're good to have. Kohlrabi, Kohlrabi, it's like an above ground turnips. The leaves can be eaten like collard leaves, and the root or bulb can be cooked like a turnip or eaten raw. The flavor is better when the bulbs are small, 2 to 4 inches in diameter. So just remember, you can eat the greens and the bulb, and just don't let it get too big. It's when it's flavorful. Onions can be grown during there's some types of little green onions you grow during the summer months, like here, but there are others that can be grown in the fall. It can be direct seeded. They also, you can buy transplants or sets. Here's some more onions. They tolerate considerable amount of cold weather, yellow, white, red varieties. Start them from plants, from sets of seeds. Surely the bigger onions are planted in the fall and grow over the winter. This is how Vidalia onions are grown. So fall is the best time, but they need to have, if you're going to grow these, but they need to have very good drainage. Very important. More important for this than any of the other plants. If you hear about excessively rainy years, the Vidalia onion crop doesn't do as well. Now, when I mentioned about Vidalia onions, you are not going to be getting that for your garden. That's a patented and only farmers can use it. But fear not, there's plenty of other varieties of onions you can use and plant out there that grow very tasty. Garlic, grown a lot like onions, very strong flavor to them. We all know about garlic. A lot of health benefits. It's said to boost the body's immune system, which should be a good thing right now. It also helps lower cholesterol and blood pressure. It is said there's a lot of health benefits to garlic. But some people, if you have indigestion, or makes them have upset stomachs if you eat them, especially in larger quantities. Now, if you're going to sow by seed, like your lettuce or turnips or radishes, make sure you sow them and don't try to make it as straight a line as possible. That's what I need to work on doing instead of zigzag crooked lines. But if you do it with crooked lines, that's okay too. Sow them at the appropriate depth, cover them with a small amount of soil, and water them in. They need to be watered in. And as they're germinating, you need to thin them out. Like read the package on the seed will tell you how far to thin them out. Like you see the ones on the right have been thinned out a little bit. So that give them enough so they're not growing into each other. Transplants, many gardeners prefer to use transplants instead of seeds, especially for the cabbage, collards, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi, the other things, easier to establish, have produced earlier crops than direct seeded crops. This is ideal for planting. This size right here, you plant it up to no deeper than the top of the root ball. That is true with all vegetables except for tomatoes. Or all transplants except for tomatoes that form adventitious roots on the stem, so that can be planted a little bit lower. Water them in good. You can also grow your own transplants. Put them in little peat pots like this. They're compact and inexpensive. If you have, especially if you got a grow light inside, you can do that. Or you can purchase them indoors. Now, see, there's the transplants. Cold frames are useful. That has the sun, maybe a few weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before planting, you can put them in there. Mulch, weed control is going to be a big challenge, both the summer and the fall. Now, mulch is good, but first of all, you have to let your seeds come up before you pull mulch out. Put mulch out. So you won't smother it, but you can. A 1 to 3 inch layer of fine texture organic mulch, pine bark, pine straw, wheat straw, fibrous mulch, what you use that really helps keep the weeds under. That does help reduce the weeds and keep soil moisture, as well as warmth in the soil. It moderates soil temperature. Landscape talk about do not use plastic, because plastic Air and water cannot infiltrate that. It's not permeable. And if the soils are wet, it can cause root rot. You can use landscape fabrics, which are permeable. And also, some people use newspaper and then put pine straw over it. One of my master gardeners has been very successful doing that. Now, some gardens, like in my community garden, there's some plots that aren't cultivated during the winter, we'll put a cover crop over it. They kind of they add nutrients to the soil, especially the leguminous plants, crimson clover, which is one that I use in my garden. And you can also use rye, wheat can be used. And then that just, it adds biomass to the soil, and the legumes especially add nitrogen. So you might want to take, I know I just take areas out of production and put the crimson clover in. Green manure, that's one time they're called cover crops. This is it in a greenhouse here where they got a variety of different things growing, as you can see on there. Now, you're going to have to deal with some pests, especially these leafy greens, cabbage and collards and broccoli. These are the cow-striped cabbage worm and cabbage loopers that will trouble and chew holes in the leaves. The easy way to control them is to use these products that have Bt bacteria in it. It targets just a caterpillar pest and doesn't hurt anything else. Dipel dust, dipel thuricide, both of those can be applied according to they're considered organic, low toxicity, but still you gotta follow the label directions and put that out according to directions, and that will bring those pests under control. I find 1 or 2 applications and they're gone. They really do a good this product. Also, you might run into aphids like the cabbage aphids, that freshly green succulent growth. That aphids like that. For control, it's relatively easy to use insecticidal soaps. They're like dishwashing detergent, but don't use dishwashing detergent. This type is specially formulated for insecticides, a safer soap, a Natria, some other brands out there. You spray according to label directions. Low toxicity, considered organic, easy to use. So, those are the major pests that you're going to have. Here's a vegetable farm in Tatnall County, Georgia, which is between Macon and Savannah, Reidsville area. You can see some Swiss chard, some what it looks like collards, and there's kale in the background. And also, this is a Vidalia onion farm in Tatnall County. These laborers are planting the individual onion plants. You can see the large fields. They have plowed up the fields with that sandy soil. It's sandier in South Georgia. That's why they grow. They don't grow Vidalia onions around here, but down there they do. This is what it looks like, areas that have already been planted. I took these pictures myself on an agent meeting we had down there some years ago, and we had a tour of this farm. Now, I mentioned a little while ago about the Bonnie plants in Union. They're headquartered in Union Springs, Alabama. They have production sites all around the country, but that's their headquarters. As you can see, look at all the plants there. That's where they grow them from seed. All basically vegetables and herbs is what they grow. Now they have contracts with Home Depots, Lowe's, Walmarts, and a lot of other places. So you'll see their trucks out, their products are in the stores, their plants are in the stores. This is another picture of the transplants there. I believe these are peppers. Another one. So they have a very sophisticated facility, and because we got a tour of that some years ago. So that's my email. I'll see some questions in the chat box, and I will answer the questions. Question about what program can you do at the library for us next? I'll get with Miriam about that. Is it too late to replant tomatoes for a late fall harvest? Well, you can plant them and probably cherry tomatoes will produce up until the frost if everything's good. Doing container gardening, what is the best soil to buy? I would use potting soil. Miracle Grow is fine to use. Nothing wrong with it. What about potatoes? Can we grow them in a container? Yeah, you should be able to do that now. I don't see any issues with that. If time about somebody said something about our Master Gardener program, send me an email and I'll give you all the details about it. And I have my email right here. Planting greens with seeds, how long does it take to grow? Well, that depends on the plant. You can be something short like radishes in a month, and it can be 80, 90 days or something like, or even more with cabbage. Can we eat the ornamental varieties, even if they're not the best tasting varieties? Absolutely can eat them, but remember, they're not grown for food purposes, but you can eat them. How long does it take the cabbage to grow? Transplant 60 to 80 days before you get a head of cabbage. Best place to buy transplants, well, I can't endorse anywhere, but I'll say the big box stores. Usually the earlier in the season, the better to get them. Some of the local independents, they take better care of it. How do you keep the bugs from eating your turnip greens? Well, I covered that with safer soap and the dye pill. Where can I get fall starter plants? Well, I just mentioned, at those stores. Shade cloth this time of the year? No, I don't think you need it, but I mean, if you want to put it out there, it's fine. Gonna plant beets, carrots, and peas. Beets and carrots. Well, make sure that you got that loose soil that they can grow in. Peas, the sugar peas in the fall grow pretty good, but they really do better in the spring. But you can grow them in the fall. To keep deer out, well, that's going to be a challenge, believe me. The clear plastic and PVC tubing, what we call the hoop houses, definitely will help. An 8 to 8 foot fence around is probably the best thing, but you use something like taste repellent, like I forgot that there's a type of spray, a taste as in TASTE repellent, liquid fence, that's the brand. Spray that on the plants. It has a foul odor that will help deter the deer. I should have put that on my corn this year. Next, I'll learn my lesson. And but you'll have to reapply it periodically. It breaks down the sunlight, and the rain can wash it off. I juice a lot. Can you use the remains for compost? Absolutely. You can use the remains for compost. Vegetable scraps can be used, but don't use meats or anything like that. I planted broccoli early and it went to seed. Can I cut those stalks back? Well, it'll grow back properly. When it went to seed, these plants tend to go to seed, and when the weather gets warm, you can cut it back. It may or may not grow out. I can't say. What is the best time to plant fall veggies? Well, you can do them in, I know it was hot in September and October, but really August into September is the best month because even though they like cooler weather, the warm soil is what they need to get germinated. Pumpkins, it's too late to plant pumpkins right now. Where's the best place to buy seeds in bulk? A couple places you can do it on online catalog, seed catalog, seed order places. Also, there's places like Brownlee's, or it's called another name now, Speed and Seed down at Hurricane Shoals and Highway 20 near the driver's license place down there. And then there's Boss Brothers out on Highway 78 east out toward Loganville. Somebody says their boyfriend says I hurt my garden by not letting it rest and replanting each season. Well, not necessarily. You can, you have to add more organic matter and you fertilize it, but there's also this thing called rotating the crops. So you don't want to, that helps. Anyhow, or cover crops. If you want to let it rest, grow a cover crop. Irish spring soap keeps deers away. Well, I don't know if that's true or not. They say meal organite will help deter them. Again, I can't say whether or not they actually do that. All right. You see my contact information, or it's our website, our email address, my phone number. Take that down. I'll give everybody a little bit of time, a few minutes to take that down and contact me. Do not be afraid to You can leave. A lot of times I'm out of the office, so leave a message. That's my email. What you can do is email if you got pictures of like pest problems or things you can't identify. Send it to me and I can identify them or get them identified for you. There are more classes you can see on this. They're all going to be by Zoom conferencing between now and the end of the year. So no face-to-face classes through the end of the year unless something radically changes. Oh, got another question here. All right, somebody said saying I did a good job. Well, thank you, and I'll thank you all for being part of this class. And contact me if you have any questions.